Hey everyone, welcome back to LabCoatz. If you've ever had an energy drink and you compulsively check labels like me, there's a non-zero chance that you've noticed taurine among the other ingredients. Taurine is a sulfur-containing amino acid that occurs naturally in meat and the human body. And honestly, I don't know why it's in so many beverages. It doesn't really do anything when you consume it, at least in these doses. It's not a stimulant or an enhancer, and it has zero impact on the drink's flavor. It's pretty much the epitome of a buzzword supplement. Taurine is also the source of an age-old myth surrounding one energy drink in particular. The myth that Red Bull derives its taurine from actual bulls, specifically from their, reproductive organs. Now, this obviously isn't true, given how expensive and labor-intensive the extraction process would be. But since I am working on cracking Red Bull's recipe for my next video, I figured it might be fun to officially bust the myth and expose how this strange ingredient is actually made on a laboratory scale. To make taurine, I used the following ingredients: ethanolamine, hydrobromic acid, acetone, sodium sulfite, hydrochloric acid, and ethanol. Everything seen here can be obtained either on Amazon or in a liquor store, except for the hydrobromic acid, which needs to be distilled from an aqueous mix of sodium bromide and sulfuric acid. If you need a tutorial for this, I've posted a few links in the video description to demos by Nile Red, Chemdelic, and NerdRage. To get things started, 190 milliliters of azeotropic 48% hydrobromic acid was added to a 500 milliliter boiling flask, followed by 26.5 grams of ethanolamine. Optimally, these reagents should be ice cold, since the reaction produces a lot of heat. Enough heat, in fact, to spontaneously boil the two on contact. It wasn't unmanageable, but I did have to combine the two slowly. The reaction that's taking place here is just a simple acid-base neutralization, and the result is a solution of ethanolamine hydrobromide in excess hydrobromic acid. That fog seen above the liquid is actually small particles of this salt that form when the fumes of each reactant touch. Unfortunately, ethanolamine hydrobromide isn't actually the desired end product for this step. What we want is this molecule, 2-bromoethylamine hydrobromide. This forms when the extra hydrobromic acid reacts with the ethanolamine's hydroxyl group, swapping it for a bromine. The problem is, this process produces water, which dilutes the mixture and stalls the reaction. Since heating is required anyway, the best workaround is to simply distill the water off, with 1-hour intervals of refluxing between each distillation. In my case, 50 milliliters was distilled first, then 20 milliliters, 15, 7, 6, 4, and then 4 again. And then, after one final reflux period, enough distillate was collected to bring the total volume up to 170 milliliters. This should have been pretty much all of the water and unreacted acid, and it's fairly important to stop here, as I learned the hard way. I left my first batch alone for a mere 5 minutes close to the end, and during that time, it overshot the mark and turned into a cloud of toxic smoke. Rookie mistake. If possible, I'd recommend using a digital hot plate with the temperature set to about 180 degrees Celsius, which is just barely above the product's melting point. Once the final distillation was complete, I carefully dumped the molten bromoethylamine hydrobromide into a beaker. Within minutes, it began to solidify into a crystalline mass, which I made sure to stir and break up before it could fully harden. Then, after giving it time to cool, I added 90 milliliters of acetone, which began to boil because I evidently didn't let it cool for long enough. Here, the acetone was used to selectively dissolve organic impurities, and given how much color it pulled out, I'd say it did the job quite well. The slushy mixture was stirred thoroughly and allowed to cool in the fridge overnight. Then, the acetone was filtered off, and more acetone was used to wash the solids. After drying, the final weight of 2-bromoethylamine hydrobromide was around 76 grams, which corresponds to a yield greater than 84%. This was surprisingly higher than the paper I followed, and thankfully, it was way more than enough to make some taurine. To do this, I first dissolved 75 grams of 2-bromoethylamine hydrobromide in 290 milliliters of water. Once fully incorporated, 50 grams of sodium sulfite was mixed in, and the solution was heated on a boiling water bath for a tedious 36 hours. During this time, the sodium sulfite attacked the hydrobromide and bromo groups, yielding sodium bromide and taurine. That's really about it. Super clean, no side reactions, no color change. I honestly wish it was more exciting than this, but unfortunately, everything went exactly according to plan. After the 36 hours were up, heating was continued until only 100 milliliters of liquid remained. The remaining solution was once again placed in the fridge overnight, and when I got it out, surprisingly, the solid seen here wasn't actually the final product. While some of it was taurine, the precipitate also contained sodium bromide and unreacted sodium sulfite. To isolate the taurine from these impurities, 185 milliliters of cold, concentrated hydrochloric acid was used to wash the solids, followed by 9 more 20 milliliter washings. Sodium bromide is mostly insoluble in hydrochloric acid, so this step served to wash out most of the taurine and isolate it from the sodium salts. Some of the sodium bromide inevitably got carried over though, and since the solution was an undesirable shade of yellow, I had to carry out a second purification step. All the filtrate was combined and boiled down until it reached a volume of about 75 milliliters, and then, while hot, 290 milliliters of ethanol was poured in. Typically, you'd expect the ionic sodium salt to be insoluble with alcohol present, and for the organic compound to remain dissolved in the organic solution. But here, the rules were essentially reversed, meaning this precipitate was actually the desired taurine. Kudos to the author for figuring out this unique purification procedure. It's honestly a really clever solution, and it seemed to work super well. The resulting taurine was mostly pure, and probably satisfactory for many chemical applications, whatever those may be. For beverage purposes though, it was far from perfect. So, I decided to perform one last step, just to maximize the product's purity. All of the taurine was dumped into a large beaker with some water, and the temperature was cranked up. The goal was to dissolve everything in a minimal amount of boiling water, so that when the temperature was dropped, the taurine would crystallize out and leave any remaining impurities in solution. That was the idea, but I apparently added a bit too much water on my first try. To counter this, I mixed in some ethanol to reduce the taurine solubility, and once the solution was teetering on the edge of crystallization, it was set aside to slowly cool. Here, I poured a bit into this watch glass to better capture the crystal growth. To briefly explain why crystallization like this works for purification, it mostly comes down to the concentration of different compounds in the solution. Here, there was enough taurine dissolved when hot to exceed the solubility limit at room temperature, so when it was cooled down, most of it crashed out. For the impurities, however, their respective concentrations were much lower, allowing them to remain dissolved. The separation obviously wasn't perfect, but the taurine that crystallized was still far purer than it was before. This was the bulk solution after a night in the fridge, and it seems like I got a pretty decent crop of taurine. The color was definitely a lot better than the off-white I started with, and after drying under vacuum for one final night, I measured the weight to be 30.5 grams. This represents a 67% yield from the 2-bromoethylamine, and 56% based on the starting ethanolamine, which is honestly really good for a multi-step reaction with such extensive purification. This amount would be enough to make over 7 liters of Red Bull, but considering the cost and massive time requirement to make it, I think I'll stick with commercial taurine for most of my batches. All that being said, I hope you've enjoyed this video. The full Red Bull deep dive should be done pretty soon, and you should definitely like and subscribe so you don't miss it. I've pretty much nailed a zero difference recipe. In the meantime, if you like tornadoes and extreme weather, be sure to check out my last video, as well as my new secondary channel, LabCoatz. I'll be putting all my storm chasing content there from now on, since it doesn't seem to fit very well here on LabCoatz. The editing and overall vibe is a lot more casual, so if that sounds cool, I've included the links down below. As always, a special thanks goes out to all the existing members on Patreon and YouTube. Projects like this aren't free, and their support truly helps keep this channel alive. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. LabCoatz out.